You've got to give to get. A loner on the fringes of AA finds the courage to seek out a sponsor. I don't know what I expected coming into Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time. I can vividly remember pondering the steps on the wall during my first meeting. I certainly did not expect to find God, or even the more acceptable higher power, there either. But there he or she was. The good news was that I had some belief in God before I got to AA, so it didn't scare me that much. Step 1 seemed okay to me. I had known for a long time that I was an alcoholic. I just did not realize that there was a specific label for it. All I knew was that I did not know how to stop drinking. I used to argue out loud with myself as I got wasted on my way into work. "I've got to stop this," I would say, only to shout back, "You know you can't stop, so why even bother worrying about it?" I could accept step 2 as well. A counselor suggested that AA might be of some use to me. I had gone to see him because I couldn't stand living in my own skin even 1 minute longer. He asked me to take a personality test with what I thought were odd questions like, "Which job would you prefer, librarian or firefighter?" And "How often have you considered suicide?" I tried to answer as honestly as I could. During my next visit, we discussed the test. He looked at me and said, "You're suicidal." And I thought, so? Isn't everybody? He explained that it wasn't normal to feel wretched the way I did, but I couldn't remember feeling any other way. Alcohol was the only thing I had found that could relieve those feelings, even for a short time. I had always thought that if you were as smart as I was, you would see how hopeless the whole life thing was. It turns out that really isn't true. I feel blessed today that I never had the guts to pull the trigger. Unlike some others, I was clear on the insanity thing. I was crazy and had been so in no uncertain terms. The people I met in AA gave me hope. They laughed and smiled, something I had not done in a long time. Like the literature says, I wanted what they had. They said AA had given this hope to them, and I believed them. AA was the higher power I began to trust to restore sanity to my life. I'd have told you that I did not have a problem with step 3, that I was doing it as I began to pray, but I did not understand early on what the step was asking me to do. My prayers were not very mature. They went something like, me, and oh yeah, if you have any time, you might want to think about those other people too. I know today that God's will for me is to be happy, joyous, and free, and the way to that freedom is through the steps, all of them. This is where I faltered. Step 3 is the jumping off place where I should have become willing to clean house, to examine my past, and to share it with another. I was not prepared to do the 4th step, the moral inventory, and there was no way in heck that I was ever going to do the 5th. I was never going to reveal my darkest secrets to anyone. They would go to the grave with me. I couldn't see how doing any of it would do me any good. Not moving forward with the steps left me only on the fringes of AA. I had always felt that the people there had the ability to see through me, that they could tell what I was thinking without my saying a word. That feeling inside started to get very uncomfortable. I stopped praying, and I cut down on meetings until I wasn't going at all. It didn't take long for my insanity to return. I didn't take a drink, but my depression and anxiety grew and grew. Every month or so, one friend from my home group would call. I'd gotten to know him well in the short time I had been in the program. We often went fishing together after work. He was the most serene person I had ever met. "How are you doing?" he would ask. "Fine," I would lie. "Well, I just called to see how you were doing." And that was it. This went on for 10 months. The longer it went, the worse I felt, until finally I had enough. I was at last tormented enough to tell the truth and to reach out for help. I wasn't fine. I was awful. My life seemed to be crashing in around me, and there was nothing I could do about it. He listened and cared. I am eternally grateful for my friend. Today I believe that because he reached out, my life was saved. With his help, I had the courage, or humility, to return to meetings. When I returned to AA, I was able to find what I needed in the, quote, John Wayne group. We called it that because we did not hold hands during the Our Father. Everyone stood alone. We shook hands, but there wasn't any hugging. This isn't what everyone needs, but it worked for me at the time. They were a bunch of crusty old-timers, and they didn't take any of my crap. A guy with 10 years was still considered a kid in those meetings. I wanted to whimper and whine and complain, but they wouldn't let me get away with it. We focus on the solution here, not the problem, they would say. After nearly 2 years of white-knuckling it, I finally had the courage, or grace, to ask someone to be my sponsor. He was one of the toughest of the tough. I said, "You scare me. Will you be my sponsor?" While he was tough, he also had what seemed an unshakable faith in his higher power. He had a special gleam in his eye. When he talked about God, it was easier for me to believe too. He convinced me that if I wanted to stay sober and have a productive life, I needed to do all the steps, not the 3-step waltz. 1, 2, 3, slip. I learned that if I had truly made a decision in step 3, I would move forward with the steps. That would be how I turned my will and my life over. My sponsor helped me prepare a 4th step by insisting that I not concern myself with the 5th. That was tomorrow, and I needed to stay focused on today. When I whined that it was hard to look at all this bad stuff, he reminded me that the process had a purpose and that I needed to continue if I wanted to get better and stay sober. Finally, I finished my 4th. I was still afraid of the 5th. That hadn't changed. I still could not understand why this house cleaning was necessary. "You can wait as long as you want to stay miserable," he said. I had spent a long time sober and miserable. Fear or no fear, I was ready to try anything. Now I needed to find someone to do my 5th step with. Then I remembered the man who had called me again and again when I was so sick but couldn't admit it. He was there when no one else was. I asked for his help and he said that he would be honored. He made me as comfortable as he could, and I told him all about myself. There was one last thing, and I wasn't sure that I could share it. It was the worst thing I had done. I had been warned that our secrets kept us sick, and I wanted my life to get better more than anything. So for that reason, I was able to let it out. He said, "I did that too." All the time I'd wasted, beating myself up and anesthetizing myself to avoid the anguish. Now I wasn't alone. It was such a relief. It was as if a 2-ton weight had been lifted from my shoulders. When I arrived home that evening, I felt as if I were floating on air. I could see myself for the first time in my life as one among many, part of the human race, not separated from my fellows. It was the closest thing to the strike of lightning spiritual experience the Big Book talks about. I had never felt closer to my higher power. I have since worked through the rest of the steps and have been sober now for a few 24 hours. My life is blessed beyond my comprehension. I am grateful for the guidance and love the members of AA showed me when I first walked through the doors. I try to do the same thing for the newcomer. Those John Wayne guys made it clear. You got to give it away to keep it. So I make a special effort to remind the new guy that there are 12 steps and that it is important to do them all. Sure, some of them can seem impossible to do, like step 5 seemed to me, but the peace of mind that waits on the other side is worth the effort. John L. Seabrook, Texas.